Thank you for tuning in to Serendipity with Sheila, the podcast that helps you align your mission with your passion. As a universal master energy healer, Sheila can help you awaken and align with your true self so you can live the purposeful life you were made for. Let's get started.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Serendipity with Sheila. I am your host, Reverend Sheila Tillich. Today, I have as my guest, Adam Gell. I know, listeners, you're going to be really in for a great treat tonight because Adam is an Akashic Record Reader. He also does Shamanic Healing and is a life mastery guide. Adam, welcome. Welcome to my podcast tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's
I
an honor to
am.
be here to share my information with your audience and yourself.
That's right. You know how we met was it was all serendipity. It was guided through the universe. I know that, and I am very, very glad to know you, and I'm very interested in what you have to say. So go ahead. Why don't you start? I'm going to actually read your bio first, and then I'm going to have you go right into it. All right.
Absolutely. Yep.
Adam Gell is a shamanic guide toward healing and fulfillment, an embodiment of the masculine balance, a union of both the masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang, the lightness and the darkness that exists in each and every one of us. He will discuss the Akashic Records and share his journey and exploration into his own ancestry through the Akashic Records and past life regressions, where he learned that his present medical condition and his distaste for stripped clothing was related to his time as a doctor in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. It's a mouthful.
It is.
Adam, I'm just so interested in this. So why don't you go ahead and tell my listeners how did this all start? How did you become an Akashic or interested in Akashic Records?
Yeah, well, naturally, it started, first of all, having a connection towards, I guess, visiting doctors for specific physical ailments, and then recognizing the fact that that really wasn't helping me. That wasn't the core of what was really going on with myself. I had always been interested in acupuncture and acupressure as a form of holistic types of healing. But what happened thereafter was to set me off on a path to better understand what lies beyond just the conventional medicine world and what exists on a spiritual level. So for myself, I had been suffering from asthmatic symptoms, breathing problems related to Lyme disease, but more so actually related to a metaphysical connection towards something that I didn't understand or was about to find out. So one of my coworkers at work that I work with had mentioned to me, "Why don't you visit my friend?" I said, I didn't know what her friend did, but all I knew is that every time I went into my gymnasium at work, I would look up at the vents in the gym, and I would get a panic attack from looking up, and I would either send the student to the custodian, or I would see the custodian in the hallway and ask him if he can shut off the heat in the gym. It really wasn't the heat that was bothering me, more so just looking up at the vent and seeing a cloth that was attached to it that showed something was coming out of the vent. That was enough to actually set me off emotionally. So I had that in the background, but I also had the emotional aspect of what I was feeling, a fear of doctors, fear of striped clothing growing up. I couldn't wear any pajamas that had stripes on them going on a vertical way. If anything was horizontal, it was fine. Always a panic or a fear going to doctors itself, mistrust. So that was in the subconscious mind. I wasn't really conscious of it at the time of what was triggering different things. But what happened was I visited this person who my friend recommended, and I called on the phone and I said to the person on the phone, I said, "I'd like to come see you." And he said, "You have asthma," which was basically true. For 1 second, I called him. He said that, and he was very abrupt, but very to the point, as I would find out, as I visited him over a course of years. So over the course of years of visiting him, he scanned my body. I had no clue of what the aura was, the etheric body. I had no understanding of it until I was visiting him, and he was working on me doing IET, integrated energy therapy, what you teach, as well as distance Reiki in a chair. He would sit in a chair and I would feel the energy moving all over, and I would freak out because I felt like I wasn't in control of myself any longer. But it
Yeah.
was a matter of me really surrendering to what was going on. So over a course of time, as he was doing the energy work on me, I became very intuitive because he'd have photos in his office of clients he was working on. And I would say, that person has leukemia, that person has this. And he said, yes, yes. Or just out of the blue, we'd be in contact in the same frequency with one another. And I'd be helping him with something on another occasion. And I would have an intuitive hit on somebody walking down the street. And I would tell him about the person that he knew. He said, exactly. So over the course of time, I was opening up to my chakras were opening up. My energy was increasing, my energetic body. And one session, he said to me, you were in the war. And I didn't mention anything of my interest. He knew the way that I spoke certain words that he said, you have a connection to Germany. And I said, I took it in. Because I felt I didn't really want to confirm anything, because I wanted to hear what he was saying, and it would be more an open channel that way. To make a long story short, he said you were marching with soldiers somewhere in Germany, and he tried to put me under a hypnotic state, and I kind of like backed off from it because I didn't really want to know too much. But along those lines, as I was going to him, I was now opening up to the rabbit hole of information that lied beyond the earthly plane, and the things that we're aware of, somewhat out of the matrix. And I was getting into the world of the Akashic Records by, I guess, like you said, when you mentioned earlier, there were just synchronicities and things happened for particular reasons.
Yeah.
And so I purchased a book by the Akashic Records by a woman by the name of Gabrielle Law. I read her book, and I learned how to open my own records. And I said, you know what, let me get a reading from her. And I happened to get a reading from her. And she said to me, did you have an experience in Germany? Did you live there? I said, I had. She said, and I described where, I lived in Germany. I was married to a German woman. My first wife was from Germany. I felt at home in Germany. She went on to tell me a little bit about my asthma, breathing problems, from being in the concentration camps and having been exposed to the visual stimulation of what you saw and the correlation between the two. And that I was a well-liked doctor that had came from a mixed marriage parents, Jewish father, German mother, and that I was well respected by the German soldiers in the camp itself. But then at the end, they had to eliminate me because I knew too much. And what was interesting is my return to Germany was almost like a homecoming in 1987. I felt like I had to go back almost make peace, with not the people who harmed me, but to feel that I'm better than the harm that was done to me. I'm more than the harm that was done to me. In other words, you can hurt me in a lifetime, but you can't hurt my soul forever. And going back to Germany was almost like, why am I going back to Germany? Now, I had no clue at that time, particularly what I had experienced in the 2011, as I just mentioned. But in 1987, I felt at home. I spoke German fluently within 5 months.
Wow.
People said, are you from here? How do you speak so well? And it was like I was home. That's how I felt.
Wow.
So with that reading, I wound up confirming a lot of things that now were like eye-opening, that gave me goosebumps and kind of like made me open my reality to why I chose the path I had, or why I was being reminded for some reason of this path. So along those lines of doing the Akashic Record reading, of having this reading, I learned to open up other people's records, and also in running side by side parallel, receiving that energy work from that person I mentioned earlier, it was opening me up to, and he said, you're going to be doing the work that I do. You have that potential. So I was doing now energy work, via Zoom, or distance healing. I'd have a client opposite me. And then eventually one woman who I did a healing for, at the end of the session, she said, I see you. I said, where do you see me? She says, I see you in the concentration camps. She says, I see you as a doctor there. And I remember you. she said, I remember you. And I said, what was I wearing? Or, and it was interesting because I was wearing like a white shirt with suspenders and boots. And I dressed like that in college on different occasions. Personally, in the 80s, I dressed with like 1940 type of garb, so to speak, or an outfit. And I felt very comfortable like in that type of clothing. So after she did that, after she told me that, I was touched because I said, oh my God, I felt a sense of guilt come over me of being in that environment, having to do that type of work. So I said, she also read the Akashic Records. So I said, is there a way that you can just ask on my behalf a little bit about some of the things that you experienced more in detail? I had already done my own Akashic Record reading on that subject, as well as having had that reading. And I found out through my own personal reading that I was from Berlin, that I had a German mother and a Jewish father, and I lived, and I saw the street actually where I lived. And I was in Berlin, but didn't know about this at the time, but I will go back to try to find it. Anyway, so she gets back to me within a week or so, and she says, you were from Berlin, you had a German mother and a Jewish father, you were an ophthalmologist, you were an eye doctor, a specialist, and you were taken from your family, and as was reported by the other person who gave me the reading, and then that was the information that I received. So when she told me that, I said, wow, this is very interesting. And so what I did was I did a remote viewing session for myself, and I saw my shoes, and I saw a building, a red building, and it happened to be the medical school. When I looked it up online, and I saw it was called the Charité in Berlin, there was a school called the Charité where most doctors, all doctors, SS doctors, Jewish doctors went to and studied in that particular school. And then many of them were taken from there to the front during the war.
Oh,
And
wow.
I drew it. First I said, let me draw what I'm seeing in my mind's eye from the remote viewing or past life, however it was. And then I looked it up, and it was pretty much 80% similar to what I drew, with a corridor in the building, in the middle, and everything else. And so I was like saying, yeah, this is definitely something real. So make a long story short, I interviewed two people, and they say, Adam, I think somebody's going to know you. These are past life people who I interviewed. Woman says, please contact this woman. I contact this woman. I didn't tell them too much of my story, but I'm telling you because I was interviewing them. And a woman gets back to me, and she says, I remember you. And I said, explain. She says, you were in Auschwitz. One of the doctors there. I know your number, the doctor number.
Wow.
And she said, you saved me, and you took me off the line because I was pregnant, and you saved me to work with you so that I wouldn't be killed. And when she told me that, and I looked it up in my mind, I saw a white building, and that's one of the buildings that exists in Auschwitz. And so from that point, I did a past life regression, and I saw the whole journey of coming to the camps, my work, and deciding that I couldn't do this work, that I wanted to be eliminated because I would not continue on with this. And so that was the spiritual end of what I received, as well as the fact that there was a council of elders in the past life regression who told me you did the right thing, and we honor you for sacrificing your body for your soul's lesson, so to speak.
Wow.
And so it was, in the whole process, it assisted me with understanding my own personal emotional journey of why I was experiencing what I was experiencing, and all the profound moments of understanding why I was going back to Germany consistently. And even now, I still have that yearning to go back, despite the fact that all the people that I had contact with during those years don't talk to me anymore. Not for any particular specific reason, but it's just interesting that all the ties are cut off to that. It's as if I was supposed to make that journey. I was supposed to uncover what I was supposed to uncover, and that was supposed to be now buried, put back into the past, and move forward. And so each time that I tried to make a connection, it's interesting. I contacted an author, a woman who wrote about Nazi Germany, and she was in the village that I lived in, and she wrote a book on it. I had told her that I was interested in what I was doing after like maybe our third conversation. After she sent me her book, I said, I'm more on a spiritual path. And she said, I can't talk to you anymore. And she cut ties completely.
Why do
And
you think she
so
did
it was,
Why do you think she did that? Why do you think she couldn't? She didn't want to. Do you think she
I
opened it up, or she didn't want to talk about the spirit stuff?
no, I think it was something that people were raised. She was probably raised maybe in a religious home maybe in a religious home, and I think some people, and specifically people, were turned off, or she was turned off to any aspect of using the word spirituality in a sense that not
Okay,
even knowing what I was talking about.
right,
Yeah, but she said, please,
right.
I don't. She said, I can't talk to you. And it was a matter of boom. Just as I mentioned, every connection to contacts in Germany was sort of severed, except the two people who are very spiritual who I connect with. But other than that, anyone on a earthly plane mindset, there was the disconnect from every one of them. But I used it as a means of saying to myself, it's a way for me to go higher, to be the impetus for my spiritual growth, and not
Mhm.
be caught up in that conflict, which is, or not, it wasn't a conflict, but in that energy of something that I desire and I'm getting
Mhm.
rejected. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Ready to ascend to new heights of consciousness? Dive into the Galactic Ascension Academy, where cosmic wisdom meets spiritual evolution. Unlock premium courses, connect with like-minded seekers, and experience monthly group healing sessions. Elevate your journey with activations, teachings, and meditations. Join the Galactic Ascension Academy today and awaken the stardust within you. Your cosmic journey starts now.
I'd like to hear more about when you talk about balancing the yin and the yang between the masculine and the feminine. How do you go about doing that when you
Yeah,
work with?
well, I mean, first off, I mean, people, specifically men, have a difficult time of opening themselves up to intuition. I mean, it's not a natural process to connecting to the feminine aspect or the
Mhm.
right side of the brain. Uh, for me, I've always been drawn, as I mentioned just before, to nature, to the environment, to what's going on around me. And, most of the men that I come into contact with are people who've had difficult childhoods, but are not able to really open up. And they're blocked by trying to be extra macho and extra masculine and trying to compensate for the real wounds that they really feel within inside themselves. And so for myself, I have a way of trying to, as a athlete myself, playing ice hockey and baseball, uh, for me, it's been interesting because I've been able to gather with people who are athletic, but also gather with people who are connected to the spiritual aspect of themselves. So my initiation of being able to help people is them seeing or feeling comfortable, knowing that I can be athletic, I can be masculine, but I could also share my inner wisdom, the feminine aspect, with others. And with working with people, with men, I try to deal with the mind, body, spirit connection of understanding role models that people had that damaged aspects of their child, of themselves, the body, of how we need to take care of our body through through exercise, eating right, nutrition, and so on, and then the connection from soul and spirit and body itself, how it's all how it all manifests together. And so bringing the wounds up and having someone feel comfortable in my presence, sharing and trusting their vulnerability, being vulnerable, helps a person open up to then take on the information of of using our intuition, our gut, rather than our brain, going into our heart as opposed to just thinking everything instead of feeling everything. And I was the perfect example of that, because I recognized I came from a home that nobody felt. Nobody
Yeah.
felt emotion. Everything was minimized or maximized, but
Well,
there was no neutrality.
wasn't it kind of the generation though? Is that they didn't know how? They didn't learn it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
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 I kind of
yeah.
I kind of found it difficult to let them off the hook, so to speak, at a certain age in my life, because I guess I wanted somewhat, I guess, revenge the actions, not in a negative way completely, but not to forgive, so to speak. That was my lack of that was my way of getting back, of not forgiving. Little did I know I was hurting myself in the whole process of like
Right.
holding on to things.
Right.
And
Right.
even still today, I hold on to so much in some ways. But yeah, I think people didn't know, but if in many cases people didn't know, but just didn't care. That's a reality in my mind. It's hard. It's a harsh reality to say that, but in order for us to come to some ease or comfort with forgiving ourselves or forgiving others, we have to say they didn't know any better. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think people didn't heal their own childhood wounds,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then that's the real reason. That's the real
Oh,
reason for not caring or not being present. So when I look at it like that, I understand it, which brought me to my documentary film that I guess we could talk about after all, if
right.
at all.
Right.
But that's what pushed me towards that path of saying, you know what, I have to love my parents for some reason. I'm codependent on them for some reason. Growing up as a child, for certain things that happen, some people leave their house, they never return, and they say, I don't want to talk to my parents no more. And for me, something was just pushing me to still create a relationship with them in order
Nice.
to hang in there and not give up. Because I think in the end, it all became fruitful. And I'm at that phase now, and I have both my parents, and I'm seeing the chapter that creates a sense of love and understanding if you hang in long enough without giving up. And so for me, that's where I'm at now. And so, the saying you said, they didn't know. Now I know they didn't know realistically, authentically, as opposed to for me just saying it, because I see they were scared to speak their truth. They were scared
Exactly.
and they were living their childhood through me, actually. And each person played a golden child, or somebody played a black sheep, and I know the role, I played, and I know the role my sister played. And I confronted her, and it's interesting because I confronted her on this years ago, not knowing the term golden child, black sheep, but for me, I understood it as what it was, and now I saw it because of the answers I got years ago, in interacting. And when a person was in complete denial of things that took place, I said, why should they share or feel anything more than they did? Because they benefited from their experience.
Yeah.
And in a good way, and also in a negative way, because everything was conditioned. So either side of the coin, someone was good or someone was bad. Nonetheless, they had to play. They lost their authenticity, or you lost your dignity, or you lost your self-respect and your shame and guilt that was also all associated with those feelings as a child. For myself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I'm very thankful for you that you have your parents are still alive, that you can work on that relationship, and all my family members have gone, and it was pretty hard for me growing up, and still having all those feelings and stuff like that. But what I know now is that they played the role that they were supposed to play, and I actually was able to be more in contact with them after they crossed over. They couldn't
Wow.
talk about the feelings. They couldn't get honest. They weren't authentic. They didn't know how to be, and
Right.
so I'm very grateful now that I have a relationship with them in spirit better than I did when they were alive. It's sad to say, but that's how it is. So I'm very thankful for you and grateful that you can share that with other people, that you can make a difference, and
Are you ready to expand your healing? Visit sheilatillich.com/events to find an online or in-person event near you. That's sheilatillich.com/events. Now back to the episode.
So tell me some more about this documentary, because that was really
Well, the documentary film, my impetus for creating this film was, first of all, my struggles as a child and living in a world of feeling like I belonged but didn't belong in my house.
Yeah.
And
Get
the
it.
tension, the trauma, all the interactions were high heated battles that took place. I was the child that questioned everything, wanted answers for things. And when people didn't have the ability to sit with their own selves, I guess I was the person that came in their way to remind them that I was there and I was in their way somewhat. And so what I did was, through my stresses, and I had no other outlet other than through sports, I found that the only person that would understand me was my grandmother. And my grandmother lived about a block and a half away, and she came from Russia after World War II.
Wow.
And she was, what happened was, she was married to when I was 7 years old, I went to her house. Let's put it this way. I went to her house and she sat me down and we wound up having lunch. And her way of her creating this symbiotic relationship between the two of us is that she was giving me food. I was getting love and attention as well, but I was also listening to her story as an 7-year-old. I would sit there and she would bring out photo albums of her family. And there were pictures of people from snowy landscapes, fur hats, fur boots, fur coats. And it was very cold and nobody had a smile on their face. Everyone appeared to be like hiding a smile. Normally in America, we grow up with smile and everybody either pretends to smile or, but nobody cared whether they smiled or not. Nobody had a smile. You can see the harshness and the lifestyle on their face.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that. And I turned to a page of a man in a military uniform, a long, big photo. And when I turned to the page, I remember my grandmother walking away from behind me, when she was telling me who everybody was, she walked to the kitchen sink and she became quiet.
Oh, wow.
And so from that point, I remembered, I said, that's something or somebody that's important, but I shouldn't mention it to her because I can see what it's doing to her.
Right.
But I was very intuitive and sharp, and so I stored it and then closed the photo album. And then I left after I went home to my father. I said, Dad, do you know that man in the military uniform? And he said, leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, wow.
So that was the second strike of me saying this man serves an important role because what you denied, you want to find out about. So I was interested.
Right.
So at 7 years of age, every time I went over to my grandmother's house, as I got older, I'd go in that photo album in her drawer where she kept all her photos, and I'd open it up to the pages and look through everybody and see who they were. I was drawn to them.
Yeah.
As the years went on, I got older. My grandmother told me that was her first husband, my father's biological father, and he was killed in World War II. He was a school teacher, and he had a difficult childhood, and so on and so forth. So to make a long story short, I created a documentary film on his journey, not his journey, on the journey of my family from the war years. They were in displaced persons camps all over Europe at the end of the war. They didn't have a home. They were running from country to country. And so I somehow, when I went through my divorce, the grandfather came back into my consciousness, because I said to myself, if he's forgotten by my father, and I'm not really having the greatest of communication with my children, what would happen if they don't really speak to me, or they just forget about me? Because the way things were going, it was possible. Right. And so I said, could I lose my name? Could I lose my place in the family? Could I lose who I represent to my own children? Just like this man lost his last name, he lost my father because my father didn't even know his name.
Wow.
And I was so perturbed by that, because I said, if I have to bring him back into the family, I have to find where he is. And so through years of research, my grandmother's diaries that she had, which were written in an indigenous language from the area they lived in, northern Russia, which wasn't Russian. It was called the Komi language. And that language was written in Cyrillic Russian letters, but not understood by Russian people. Because I sent it to people here. I said, could you do me a favor and read this? They said, I can't read it. So by chance, I went into my grandmother's box that she left when she passed away with all photo albums. I found her diaries, and I found letters, and I found an address from the town that she might have lived near. I didn't even know. I wrote a letter by Google Translate, and I sent it. And maybe a month later, I received a letter saying, I am the niece of your grandmother. I do speak the Komi language still, and I will accept those diaries if you'd like me to translate them. She's translated about 40 pages of language. She was 82 years old. She could barely write. She wrote it in Russian. And then from Russian, she sent it to me. And then I had people here who could translate it. And so my documentary film is segments of the diary tied into the war years. and my journey to find my grandfather in Russia, where he was buried, or where he lied in the mass grave in Russia. So I went there and I found his body. I found his family, my father's biological family, and I felt his spirit with me, and I felt his connection to me, actually.
Wow.
So that's my documentary film is about a love story and me finding and connecting to my past.
Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, this has been awesome. This has been really eye-opening, and I love it because I love history myself. And my parents also was in World War II. My father was, and it explained who he was. I was able to read letters when he was in the service, and it was part of the healing process for me that I had to go through, you know. But it was part of like putting all the pieces together for my family too. So this is really extraordinary, this documentary that you did. I know my listeners would love to hear that. Yeah. So your website, can you tell my readers how they can get a hold of you if they'd like to?
Yeah, sure. It's Adam Gell, universalhealing.com. And yeah, I have that, and I have my YouTube channel, Conversations with Adam Gell and Inspiring Minds, where I interview people who have near-death experiences, people who are raising people's level of consciousness, sharing their practices of holistic practices and their journey to that, such as yourself,
Oh, wow.
as well as others. And I'm very focused in on galactic connections, people who've had experiences, near-death experiences, and have had that connection with some type of galactic being or beings, and my connection to it as well. So yeah, that's my website. Yeah.
This is wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm sure my listeners will be getting in contact with you because it's very, very interesting in how you can help humanity in such a profound way. So thank you very much, and thank you for being here with me tonight. And I look forward to seeing and talking to you again because
Yeah,
we got a connection here. We got a connection here. So, all right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on Serendipity with Sheila, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, Adam. And I'll make sure they're going to put all that information, your documentary, in the notes so they can get a hold of you along with your website. You're welcome. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Are you looking for tools, jewelry, meditations, and merch to remind you to stay in tune and in the present? Make sure you stop by SheilaTillich.com/store, and while you're there, visit SheilaTillich.com/subscribe to get a discount code for a free meditation from the store.